Welcome to Mooney Reads, and welcome to a queer history recommendations video. October is LGBT History Month, and I've read a lot of really good books about queer history or adjacent to it. And what I've decided to do, I've paired the books that I like or have read with a book that is on my physical TBR. So in this way, you're getting extra recommendations, and I end up kind of encouraging myself more to pick some of these up. To be clear, this is not like books on my October TBR or something like that. These are just books that I own and want to read. And I put so many of these pairings together that I'm actually going to need to do 2 videos. And they'll probably both be kind of long. But that's fine. That's fine. This one is going to be more identity specific for the most part. I've got a few lesbian history, lots of trans history, and a couple of other things. And then next video is going to be more focused on queer politics and the HIV and AIDS epidemic in the 80s and 90s. And I guess I should put this in the beginning. Just kind of a note on the word lesbian, really queer language throughout, like our understanding of like transness and things. Something like this could also be said. The meaning of these words has changed historically, and that's clear from a lot of these books. So when I'm saying lesbian history, in practice, it ends up encompassing lesbians, bisexual women, and even some like trans masc or non-binary people. Just kind of depending on the time you're looking in, because gender and sexuality are a lot more wibbly, and the language and understanding of what those things even mean has changed drastically throughout time. I'm going to start out with one of my favorite nonfiction books of last year, and that was This Is What Lesbian Looks Like, Dyke Activists Take on the 21st Century. This is an anthology of lesbian experience. Specifically, this looks at a wide variety of lesbians with different racial and ethnic backgrounds, different genders, and sometimes different ideas of what it means to be lesbian. There are also a lot of people who talk about disability here. This was published in 1999, turn of the century, and a lot of this focuses on politics. And this book ended up sending me on like a rabbit trail of anthologies like this. Just because of like looking into the authors from this, I have several lesbian anthologies, a bisexual anthology, some on class, and other things like that. But the one that I'm gonna talk about is Inventing Ourselves, Lesbian Life Stories. And this one was published in 1989. So you're getting kind of a different generation, or I don't know if you do like half generations. I don't know how that framework really works. But this is the one that I've gravitated towards most recently. The first sentence of the description says, Inventing Ourselves is an entertaining, moving, and revealing book which places lesbianism at the center of a wider social history. It's an oral history and as such allows many stories and versions to be told. It opposes the idea of history as seamless heritage. Because the speakers deal with change, narratives unfold of cause and effect. The stories here cover time from the 1930s to 1987. These are a little bit different in terms that I guess these people wrote their essays, whereas this is an oral history and they're telling them, but it's still very similar and kind of go together in my head. So, there are those. The next one that I have that focuses on lesbian history is Lesbians in Germany, 1980s through 1920s, edited by Lillian, Faderman, and Bridget Eriksson. This is a short anthology that has both fiction and nonfiction that is from Germany and related German-speaking places before World War II. These were not translated it into the English until the 1980s when this book was published. And this gives you a really good look into what the varied experiences of lesbians at this time were. Both like personal experience, but also like understanding of gender and sexuality. So in that way, I guess all of these books so far kind of go together. And to go with Lesbians in Germany, I have Thank You for Calling the Lesbian Line by Elizabeth Lovatt. And this is a work of nonfiction that is based on a lesbian line call log from the 90s. And this is based out of Britain. This has elements of both like the history of like what we can glean from these call logs, but also a bit of memoir as well. So we have Britain in the 1990s and Germany in the 1890s. The next book that I have is She by Minnie Bruce Pratt. I talked about this actually and Lesbians in Germany in a previous recommendations video that I made for Sapphic September. This is a really like beautiful kind of poetic memoir that Minnie Bruce Pratt wrote about her. It begins with her growing up in the South and coming out as a lesbian after having been married to a man, and focuses a lot on her different partners and lovers throughout the years until she gets to Leslie Feinberg, for whom the book is written towards. So it's like this is all just a letter to Leslie, and I love that about this. It's very sweet, but with this, obviously you get the stories of her different partners and things like that, but there's also a lot in here about politics and activism. Minnie Bruce Pratt was an anti-racist advocate and talks about how her kind of racist upbringing kind of contributes to why she is passionate about being intentional in regards to racism. And there's a really cool part towards the end where she's at the Women's Festival with Leslie and a group of trans people, and that experience of marching through the Women's Festival. So in that way, a lot of what this is kind of talks about solidarity and things like that. So I have paired it with Marsha, The Joy and Defiance of Marsha P. Johnson, which is a biography of a trans activist and icon, who, as far as I know, doesn't really have any other like biographies or memoirs. Some documentaries, but I think this is the first of its kind in terms of larger biographies. And I'm certain that this is also going to talk about the importance of solidarity and the like. So that takes us into books that are more specifically about trans history and the like. Starting with Gender Outlaw, On Men, Women, and the Rest of Us by Kate Bornstein. This isn't strictly historical, but it is a classic and looking at trans identity and gender. This has some historical elements, social science elements, and memoir elements, and it's just really good. You also have the option of looking at the difference between the first edition and the revised edition, and seeing how stuff has changed, and like how she kind of writes about gender as a concept or as it applies to herself. And to pair with this, I have Burn the Binary by Rikki Wilkins. Rikki Wilkins is also an important person in gender studies and actually popularized the term genderqueer. So this is kind of a collection of different works and essays. Next, I have some broader trans histories with Susan Stryker's Transgender History, which is, of course, a classic. This is one of the more well-known trans histories. As a caveat, I have not sat and read it from cover to cover, but I have read a lot of excerpts for my master's thesis. I do want to read it from cover to cover, but I'll probably wait until the revised edition comes out. I'm not 100% sure on the date, but I know that's supposed to come out soon, which is very exciting. To pair with this one, I have Trans America, A Counter History by Reay. So this explains trans people and culture throughout, it looks like the 1900s in America, to give a little snippet of the bit on the back. It says, arguing for the complexity of a trans past and present, Trans America will be a groundbreaking work for the trans community, as well as anyone interested in the history of medicine, sexuality, psychology, and psychiatry. So it seems like it has a pretty broad scope, a lot of things happening. So that one looks really good. Next, I have Decolonizing Drag, which obviously is not strictly history, but it talks about a lot of important things in terms of nuances between cultures. It also brings up kind of history of drag and gender expression more widely, especially in places before they were colonized. So this has a wider scope than just the historical, but it is still an important piece of kind of understanding it. And I've paired it with Before We Were Trans, which I've actually started a while back. One of the like litany of books that I read a little bit of, start, stop, and I'll probably eventually sit and read it in like a couple of days or something, just because that's how my brain ends up working sometimes. But this looks at trans people in different areas globally and different parts of history. Kind of what this looked like in different cultures, when they didn't have this same language or understanding that we do kind of in current day, but it shows that this sort of like variety in gender is long-standing and integral to the human experience. Okay, and then I have, for the last few things, I think there are areas of the queer community that are a lot more underrepresented. Starting with a couple of books on intersex. Sexing the Body by Fausto Sterling is kind of like the, kind of like, I keep saying the classic text, but like that, it is kind of what it is. It was published in 2000. It's kind of the go-to for a lot of academics talking about intersex issues, a lot of her writing in general. And this one I have not read from cover to cover. I have read a lot of excerpts of Fausto Sterling stuff, but this is standing in for my book because I don't think I've actually read a whole book on intersex people or intersex history, barring maybe like a memoir or something. But this is more in depth. This is kind of like looking at social construction of sex and experience of intersex people. So not strictly history, but still adjacent enough that I think it's important to bring up in the conversation of queer history. And then the book that I'm pairing that with is Contesting Intersex, The Dubious Diagnosis by Georgann Davis. I did get to see this author do a talk. I don't want to think about how many years ago it was, just because I feel very, very old. But I got my copy signed, and it's one that I really want to read. Again, it's not strictly history, because it's talking about much more than that, but history is like a big part of it. Here's the flyer from the conference that I got this book at, 2018. And then the last set of recommendations that I have revolves around asexuality. A book that I have read on asexuality is The Invisible Orientation, An Introduction to Asexuality. Again, not strictly history, but still informational, and gives you, I think, a picture of what the asexual community looked like at this particular time. This was published originally in 2014, which is over a decade ago, as much as I hate that. And I think it's kind of historic in being one of the first, if not the first, I haven't fact checked that, but a really early text actually looking at the asexual community. So, to pair with that, I have Refusing Compulsory Sexuality, a Black Asexual Lens on Our Self-Obsessed Culture. I think the subtitle kind of tells you everything. I've heard a lot of good things about this, but just have yet to read it. So that is part 1 of my queer history recommendations. If you've read any of these or have any suggestions kind of based on these, definitely let me know about it in the comments. And let me know if you are interested in reading any of these. Thank you all so much for watching. Bye.